not after his likeness. Because after God's likeness, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, 28, and he blessed them. So man in the image of God is blessed forever. That means man in the man's image of God can never be destroyed. Because that would mean that God would have to take back his blessings. And he doesn't do that. That blessing was forever. Now let me tell you why. Oh, I got two things going, but I'm going to tell you why. First of all, I'm going to tell you why the blessing, and then I'm going to tell you why or when man was created after God's likeness. It wasn't until after sin and death entered into the world that man achieved or man accrued the likeness of God. But first of all, let me tell you about the bless. On camera 2. Now you might not be able to see this. It's a little the lettering is a little small. So I'm going to talk off camera for just a few minutes, and I'm going to talk off camera and tell you what's on this visual that you see on your TV screen. We're talking on the top of it. It says crossing over to New Testament Bible theology, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And on the last line said we're talking about the pre-creation thoughts of God. We're talking about what was on the mind of God before he said, let us create man. What was his plan? What provisions had he made? There are 3 passages of Scripture that tells us that when God said in Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our own image after our likeness, that his plan was complete. There was nothing left undone. And you can find that in let's see, where can we find that? You can find it in Acts chapter 15, verses 13 through 18. It was spoken by the apostle James, Jesus' brother. And you can find it again by the writer to the Hebrews in 4:3, known to God are all of his works. But now I have 12 scriptures on this screen, and each one of them is speaking about a pre-creation aspect of God's thoughts. Now, if you say, how can you know the thoughts of God before creation? Well, you can know them because God told them, has told them to us, and they are in those 12 passages of Scripture. John 1 through 5, Titus 1, 2, and 3, Ephesians 1, 3 to 7, 2 Timothy 1, 9 and 10, Colossians 1, 25, Revelation 13, 8, Revelation 17, 8, Romans 16, 25 to 27, Ephesians 3, 3 to 12, 1 Thessalonians 5, 9 to 10. All of those scriptures will give you insight as to what was on God's mind before creation, before he created man, before sin and death came into this world. And if you want an example, go to Jeremiah 29, 11, where God says, I know the thoughts that I have towards you. So that's why in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God can bless mankind, because he had already made provision to redeem and to save mankind. And he wasn't going to go back on that, so he might as well bless him. Now let's talk for a minute about the likeness. You know the story. And yes, there is such thing as original sin. There is a phenomenon called original sin. And it's found in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17 and 3:11. There is such thing as original sin. It's important that you understand that, because when we talk about sin and death, in a few minutes, I'm going to tell you some things about sin and death that's going to blow your mind. You've been living in darkness. You think you know what's happening or what this Bible say. You've got to, in this Bible, you have got to ask God, not what did you say, God? You have got to ask God, what did you mean by what you said? I didn't say ask Schofield. I didn't say ask Vine. You got to ask God, what did you mean by what you said? Schofield doesn't know. Vine doesn't know. He only knows so much as to what God has revealed to him. And his measure of faith may not be as great as yours, so he won't know as much as you. Oh, he might be able to interpret the Bible. That ain't nothing. Anytime you read the Bible, you're not interested in what. You're interested in the question of why and how. Anybody can read what, but why and how. Now let's talk about this original sin. Genesis 2, 16, 17, where now God, man is in the garden. That them he's talking about, he's in the garden, and the female is still a part of his anatomy. In 16 and 17 is still a part of his anatomy. And he said, there are some trees in the garden. I'm going to paraphrase this. There are trees out in the garden, and you may eat of every tree in the garden except one. Now, included in that garden is the tree of life, whose fruits give life eternal. Now, you can say, well, how come he didn't eat the fruit from the tree of life instead of eating the fruit from the other tree that was the forbidden tree, which was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Hey, this is not your story. This is God's story. And I just told you on camera 2 for that visual that God's story already has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. His story is complete. When you go down to Borders, or when you go down to one of those bookstores, you buy the complete book. You don't go in there and try to change the author's ending and middle, body, beginning, thesis statement. You don't know that. You just go, you buy what you got. That's the same thing here. This is a complete book. It does not need our input. It's self-contained. It has its own power to act upon the human heart. So now, let's go back. We're still in Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 and 17. Genesis 2, verses 16 and 17, where God is giving him the command. This is a test of faith. You may eat of every tree in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. Surely die. Okay, now, you know what God meant by surely die. This is the 14th of January 2010. So you might know what it means, what the surely die mean. If you're a Christian, you should know what surely die mean. But at that time, when we go a little bit further, when we get to chapter 3, where, well, in 18, we have the creation of the woman in the image of God